The rumble of 40 Harley-Davidsons shook the cracked asphalt of the little desert truck stop like an earthquake that refused to end. Dust devils danced between the bikes, and every head in the place, truckers, waitresses, a terrified cashier, turned toward the wall of leather and chrome that had just rolled in. Skulls, eagles, and flaming reapers stared out from patched vests. The Hell's Angels had arrived, and the air itself seemed to tighten. Then a tiny voice cut through the thunder. "Hello, sir. My mother has a tattoo just like yours." Every bearded face swiveled at once. Standing between two gleaming bikes, no higher than a saddlebag, was a 6-year-old girl in a faded pink sundress and scuffed cowboy boots. Her blonde hair was tangled from the desert wind, and she clutched a stuffed rabbit that had only one ear left. She wasn't afraid. She was staring straight up at the biggest, meanest-looking man any of them had ever let wear the death head patch, Jax Reaper McAllister, Sergeant-at-Arms of the Oakland chapter, 6'5", arms like bridge cables, and a teardrop tattooed beneath his left eye that most people never got the chance to ask about. The parking lot went dead silent except for the ticking of cooling engines. Reaper looked down at the kid the way a wolf looks at a sparrow that just landed on its paw. He opened his mouth, probably to tell her to beat it, but the words stuck. The little girl had already lifted the hem of her dress just enough to show the top of her skinny thigh. There, in childish blue ink that was clearly fresh and done with a sewing needle and Bic pen, was a crooked, wobbling attempt at the Hell's Angels' winged death head. Every biker within 20 feet sucked in a breath. Reaper crouched slowly, knees cracking like gunshots, until he was eye level with her. "What's your name, kid?" "Emily Rose Carter," she said proudly, as if she'd been practicing it in a mirror. "But Mama calls me Em." Reaper's gaze flicked to the truck stop door, then to the ancient Chevy Impala parked crooked by the gas pumps. The back seat was piled with laundry baskets, trash bags, and what looked like every possession two people owned. A woman stood frozen beside the driver's door, 28 maybe, thin, sunburned, blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She had the hollow-eyed stare of someone who'd been running for a long time. A bruise, yellow-green and fresh, circled her left eye. Reaper knew that look. He'd seen it in his own mother's mirror 35 years ago. Emily pointed at the massive, professionally inked death head that covered Reaper's forearm. "Mama has one right here," she said, touching her chest just below the collarbone. "Only hers is prettier. It has roses around it." The woman, her mother, took one hesitant step forward, then another. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Em, honey, come back to the car. Please." But Emily didn't move. She looked up at Reaper with absolute trust. "Mama said the skull means you never leave your family behind. She said you ride through hell to keep them safe. Is that true?" Reaper felt something shift in his chest, something he hadn't felt since the day they lowered his little sister's casket into red Georgia clay. He swallowed hard. "Yeah, kid," he said, voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "That's true." Behind him, the other angels were watching. Big Bear, the chapter president, a mountain of a man with a gray beard to his belt, rested a hand on Reaper's shoulder. Nobody spoke. They didn't have to. They'd all buried brothers, sisters, kids. They knew what certain bruises meant. Emily's mother, her name was Kayla, reached her daughter and tried to pull her away, apologizing in a whisper. "I'm so sorry. We'll go. We're leaving." Reaper stood up slowly. "Where you headed, Kayla?" She flinched at her own name, like she hadn't heard it spoken gently in years. "Nowhere," she said, barely audible. "Everywhere. Just, away." Big Bear spoke for the first time, voice low but carrying like Sunday church bells. "You got family waiting somewhere?" Kayla shook her head. Tears started falling, but she didn't bother wiping them. "Not anymore." Emily tugged her mother's hand. "Mama, they have the same picture. They're the good ones." "You said so." Kayla closed her eyes, ashamed. "I was 15 when I got it," she whispered to the men, not meeting anyone's gaze. "Thought it meant I'd always be protected. Turns out it just made some people hit harder." Silence stretched across the desert like a held breath. Then Reaper did something nobody in that chapter had ever seen him do. He reached out, slow enough that Kayla could pull away if she wanted, and gently touched the bruise on her cheek with 2 fingers, like he was checking if a bike part was cracked. "Who?" he asked. She shook her head. "Doesn't matter. He knows people. Cops, judges. I took him and we ran. That's all." Reaper looked at Big Bear. Big Bear looked at the 20 brothers behind him. Not a single man was still sitting on his bike. They were all standing now, arms folded, waiting. Big Bear nodded once. Reaper turned back to Kayla. "You're in Nevada right now, darlin'. About 100 yards that way is California. Our territory. You cross that line with us, nobody touches you or your little girl again. That's not a promise. That's gravity." Kayla stared at him, afraid to believe it. Emily had no such problem. She threw her arms around Reaper's leg like he was a redwood tree. "Thank you, sir." Reaper looked helplessly at the child clinging to his grease-stained jeans, then at his brothers. A few of them were grinning despite themselves. 1 or 2 had tears they'd never admit to. Big Bear cleared his throat. "We're riding to Vegas tonight. Family-friendly run, charity toy thing. You and the kid ride in the chase van with Doc and his old lady. When we stop, you eat. When we get there, we figure out what's next. No strings. You say no, we put you on a bus anywhere you want. But if you say yes," he shrugged, as if the rest was too obvious to speak out loud. Kayla's knees buckled. She would have hit the ground if Reaper hadn't caught her. She sobbed once, hard, into the front of his cut, the first time she'd let herself cry in front of Emily in 2 years. Emily just patted her mom's back and looked up at the ring of bikers. "Mama, they're angels. See. They have wings on their backs." Some of the men chuckled at that. Reaper didn't. He was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. They fed the girls inside the diner, pancakes for Emily, coffee and eggs for Kayla. The waitress, who'd been terrified 20 minutes earlier, kept refilling cups for free and slipping extra bacon onto Emily's plate. Outside, the angels pretended not to notice Kayla counting the few crumpled bills in her purse, pretending not to see Reaper slide a wad of hundreds across the counter when she went to the bathroom. On the highway an hour later, the chase van, a beat-up Suburban with a Hell's Angels support sticker on the back, followed the long line of bikes. Emily sat between Doc's old lady Marlene and Kayla, eyes wide as the formation roared through the desert. Every few minutes a biker would peel off, ride alongside the van, and wave at the little girl in the window. She waved back until her arm got tired. Reaper rode point, wind tearing at his beard, the weight of that child's trust heavier than any burden he'd carried in 20 years of colors. That night in Vegas, the charity run raised $40,000 in toys for kids in foster care. Emily got to sit on Santa's lap, even though it was July, and Santa was actually Big Bear with a fake beard and a grin a mile wide. She asked for a house where Mama doesn't have to be scared anymore. Santa's eyes got suspiciously wet, and he told her he'd see what he could do. 2 days later, in a quiet clubhouse backyard in Oakland, Kayla sat at a picnic table and told her story to a room full of men who'd seen every kind of ugly the world had to offer. When she got to the part about her ex, now currently a deputy sheriff in a small Arizona county with a bad habit of teaching lessons to women who tried to leave, Reaper's knuckles went white around his beer bottle. They made phone calls that night. Not the kind that leave paper trails. 3 days after that, Kayla's ex got pulled over outside Kingman for a busted taillight. What the highway patrol found in his trunk made the front page of the Arizona Republic for a week. Turns out carrying that much meth while wearing a badge tends to ruin your whole career. The dashcam footage of him crying and begging mysteriously disappeared, but the conviction stuck. Kayla never asked what happened. She just cried again when the public defender called to say all charges against her for custodial interference had been dropped. Emily started first grade that fall in a little house 2 blocks from the Oakland clubhouse. The picket fence was second-hand, the paint was fresh, and the mortgage was paid in cash by a veterans charity nobody could quite track down. Every Friday afternoon, a line of Harleys showed up to walk Emily home from school. The principal stopped asking questions after the 3rd week. The bullies who used to tease Emily about her thrift store clothes suddenly found religion, or at least found something scarier than middle school attitude. Reaper, Uncle Jax now, taught her how to throw a punch without breaking her thumb. Big Bear taught her how to read the clouds to tell when rain was coming. Marlene taught her how to make lasagna and how to swear in Italian.